Let's please make welcome Dr. Judy Morgan.
Welcome back. Sorry you have to sit through that 700 times. And by the way, it was actually, we have to update that. It was 38 years and I'm up to 7 books because 3 have come out in the last few months because I don't know what happened. I don't know. I was doing 1 a year and then I took a few years off because I don't know, I got busy, something, and then I was like, I gotta catch up. So we got more planned for next year. All right, that's our kitchen. That's my carnivore 1 horsepower grinder, which is amazing. Highly recommend those if you're gonna make a bunch of food. And if you can get a smaller one if you, I did destroy my husband, remember he's the chef, destroyed his KitchenAid, which we had a nice little metal grinding attachment on. I got a piece of beef trachea stuck in it and destroyed it. That was kind of expensive. So then I got this. All right, so this is gonna be a little trickier. And so if you have some TCVM background, that'll make this a lot easier. This is one sometimes I have to stop and think about it as well. So we're going to get into feeding for personalities and the 5 elements. So we want to understand each element type and then the typical imbalances that happen with those types. So you're going to recognize some of these animals that we've been talking about throughout the day, like they're going to show up again. All right. So we have 5 elements: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And each element has its own personality type. And each element, I'm not sure how I did. Okay. All right. Oh, can we go back? Okay. Each element affects the other elements. So it's just like you can't have all yin, you can't have all yang, you can't have only fire, you can't have only earth. So if we follow the arrows around the outside, and this is just a very small piece of how things interact, but this is what we're going to talk about. Follow around the outside the black arrows. Fire is the mother of earth. Earth is the mother of metal. Metal is the mother of water. Water is the mother of wood. Wood is the mother of fire. So if you think about that, what feeds a fire? Wood. What feeds plants and wood? Water. So we can go around, that's the parent. So the parent is going to support the child. So let's say we have a weak fire element. Well, we can either feed fire or we can feed wood because that's going to support that element. Then we have the inner star, and that's the controlling element. That's the grandparent, so it's going to be 2 back on the outer circle. So metal, the metal axe chops down the wood tree, okay? The water puts out the fire. So if we have an excess in wood, we could feed metal. And I'm going to talk about wood first, and I'll give you a couple examples. So if we have an excess in water, we can feed earth, because earth dams up the water. So we can do that to try to help control excesses, and then we can also feed deficiencies. So this is taking this, like if you only went with the energetics of food that we talked about with yin and yang, you're gonna make big differences for your patients if you just do that much. Like my office manager's dog, that we went from a lamb and rice kibble to a beef kibble, and that was enough to cool that dog down and get done what we needed, and it was a very subtle change without, sending everybody into a tailspin. So you can make subtle changes. Then when you're really getting into it, you can get to this level where you're like, wow, this is really cool. It's like a logic puzzle, and I'm gonna put this puzzle together. All right, so let's talk about wood element. Wood element is the color green. So remember all those dark leafy greens that we were feeding for liver problems? Well, liver and gallbladder are the elements that go with wood. Springtime, green, dark leafy greens. That's why it supports that. We see wood element a lot of times in black and tan, tricolor, or brown coats. So black and tan, that's our Rottweilers, that's our Dobies, that's our Shepherds. Remember all those pictures of aggressive, angry dogs? Yeah. And no, I have had Dobermans for a long time. I'm not saying that they're all aggressive and nasty. I'm just saying if they're a wood personality, they may be impatient and they may bite with little provocation. They're very confident and competitive, tend to be dominant. That's why these make great Schutzen dogs. These make great police dogs. They want a job. These are working animals. But we also see those little Yorkies who are like, oh, let me take out your ankles. A lot of them fall in here as well. They tend to be the alpha in the pack. The liver wood element opens to the eyes. So anytime you have red eyes, let's put out what's going on. We've got an excess in the liver, the wood element. So when you see those red eyes, it's like, maybe we should look at his liver enzymes. very commonly in my practice, the first symptom of lymphoma, red eyes. So when they come in with red eyes and you're like, let's feel lymph nodes and maybe get some blood work. So, and the wood element is responsible for healthy tendons and ligaments. So if you have animals with cruciate tears, they blow out one. What's the statistics? 70 to 80% of them are going to blow out the other one within a year. Support their liver blood, their liver yin? Maybe not. Okay, so that's how we use this stuff. So I personally am a wood element. I'm kind of alpha. I kind of like to be in charge. I'm pretty opinionated. You might not have noticed. And metal clients make me crazy because they come in with their spreadsheets and they come in with their 75 questions. And I finally figured out, why do they make me crazy? Because I'm wood and they're chopping down my dang tree. Like, they're trying to rule me and I'm like, no, I'm alpha. And so they make me nuts. But you know who your best employees are? Get a metal. We'll talk about them. They will balance your checkbook to the penny. They will make sure that all your employees are in line. They're also, my best friend is a metal. We make sure that she and her husband go on all trips with us because she does all the planning. I just follow along and go, okay, it's awesome. So metal friends and metal employees are awesome. Metal clients, if you're a wood, are going to make you crazy. Unless you like spreadsheets. I don't even know how to make one. All right. So the liver is responsible for detoxifying, filtering, and it can be damaged by a lot of things. Pesticides, all these chemicals that we're feeding our animals. Like, it seems to make sense to feed a pesticide, but why not? Medications, toxic food. These are the ones that frustration causes that liver chi stagnation. So that's damaging this element, and lack of work, because that is a working dog. Does that dog look happy? That dog's like, I'm so bored. When are they going to come home from work? When are we going to go out and chase something? So they need a job. So common patterns that we see, liver chi stagnation, we've talked about that multiple times. Liver blood deficiency, so that's our tendon and ligament problems. Disorders associated with this element, seizures. So if you think of spring, this is the element of spring. Spring, the trees, the leaves blow, that's shaking, that's seizures. That's an internal wind. We see a lot of allergies in these animals. Shepherds, like an allergy looking for a place to happen. We see a lot of liver and gallbladder disease, hepatitis, anal sac disease, and ear disease, ear infections, because that's where the meridians run. And then the lichenification and hyperpigmentation of the axilla and groin. If you just look at where the gallbladder meridian, it starts at the eyes, zigzags around the ears, goes down the neck and the armpits and the groin. It's like, okay, well, let's get the damp heat out of the gallbladder meridian and all that goes away. So aggression is a problem when they've got the liver chi stagnation. We talked about the cracked, brittle, broken nails, those onychodystrophy dogs, tendon and ligament tears, and anything with the eyes. Like, always be looking at the wood element. Like, how can I soothe the liver if I have this liver fire that's coming up and showing up in the eyes? So foods that support the wood element, we've talked about these kind of throughout the day, but like feeds like, so we're going to get a little bit of liver in there. Barley, again, if you're using grains, this is a great one for cooling. It's also a good blood tonic for the liver, but it's also kind of cooling and draining. Dark leafy greens for sure, but the dandelion greens, the mustard greens, those are going to help drain that stagnation. We like our oranges and reds for this, so carrots are very good for stagnation. Asparagus is draining, mushrooms I like for everything. Our citrus fruits and peels. And then chlorella and spirulina are also a really dark, bright green. The liver loves those. So the wood element is going to do really well if we add that as a supplement. Eggs are good for these guys. And then any foods high in lycopene and lutein, because those are going to be kind of our red and orange things. I don't use tomatoes in my diet, but we had one dog. She was a wood personality, and she would go steal all the tomatoes off our vines. I had a hard time getting tomatoes before she got to them. So a lot of times if you have a garden or you have herbs or whatever, and you look at what the animal is eating, they're just trying to tell you, hey, this is what I need. So pay attention to them. So these are things that we use for these guys. So that's going to support our wood element. And then if we have that excess with that stagnation, That's where we're going to use these things to help drain the liver. So ginger, garlic, corn silk, hawthorn, dandelion root is one of my favorites, but mustard greens will do just as well. Beet greens, usually we buy beets, we cook the beets, we throw away the greens. Don't throw those away, please eat them. Please use them for your pets, they're awesome. Turnips are great. So like I said, I don't use potatoes for my pets, and like I said, I'm a wood personality. So if we have mashed potatoes, I like to have cooked turnips mixed in with my mashed potatoes. You can't even taste that they're in there. It's funny, my father would not eat anything like that, and we used to make our mashed potatoes with turnips, and he never noticed. So good way to hide something healthy. Daikon radish, you could do the same thing. All right, so vitamins, minerals, and supplements that we use quite commonly with these animals that have elevated liver enzymes. Milk thistle, there's a million products on the market. Just make sure you're getting a clean one. SAM-E is awesome, but it needs to be given on an empty stomach. So this is like Denamarin is SAM-E and milk thistle. It's not my favorite product. I would rather use separate ones, but if that's what you have available, that's what you have. Methionine and cysteine and taurine are really important for these guys, so we can get that through a lot of our whole foods. So that makes it pretty simple. Zinc, we talked about that, oysters, mussels. Most of it's going to come from seafood. We can get it in beef liver, but it can be a little tricky, like wheatgrass, turmeric. And again, I thought that was a really good question that somebody asked, like, well, okay, you know, we're looking at AFCO regulations. Do we know that they really need that much zinc? I don't know. Who knows? But I think that by the time we cook the crap out of food and it's, you know, highly processed, I think we lose so much. So I think if we're feeding fresh foods, we're not going to have as much trouble. Selenium, large fish, heart, and that's common in the grains, so barley and oats. And unfortunately, our soil has gotten so depleted that we have a lot of, particularly in our horses, we have a lot of selenium deficiency. Sometimes I have a little trouble getting the selenium up where I need it to be, but I don't feel like it's going to be a huge long-term problem for our pets. You can get some muscle weakness if they are chronically selenium deficient, but I haven't seen that as an issue in small animals. B-complex vitamins. So again, just whole foods, meats, organs, dark leafy greens, we're going to do fine with those. The cats are trickier. That if you start formulating for cats, you're going to find that we have a little bit more trouble because their thiamine levels need to be so much higher, so they're a little trickier. So for these wood personalities, avoid those highly processed foods because it's just going to cause so much liver cheese stagnation, or foods that are high in cooked fat. So if they're on a higher fat diet, make sure that the fats are raw. Somebody did ask me at the end of the last lecture, and it was a really good point. For the plant oils that you're putting in your food, if you're cooking the food, the plant oils are usually going to do fine. For the omega-3s like fish oils, add those after cooking if you're going to cook, or add them at the time of feeding. They're fine to be frozen, like if you're making up your little meals and you want to put your supplements in there. Like we left home and left all of our little containers with all the food and the supplements in there, and I just told my mom, hey, to warm these up, you just got to sit those containers in a bowl of warm water, so because you can't cook those oils, they will become rancid. So not so much a big deal with the veggie oils, but definitely with the fish oils. Yes? Yep, yeah, dark leafy greens we're going to use across the board for this, but if you have a stagnation, that's where we need those ones that drain. So the dark, that's where you want to get the mustard greens or the dandelion greens. Whereas if you have more of a liver blood deficiency, kale, collards, those are going to be, spinach, those are going to be really good. Spinach, again, we worry a little bit about the oxalates, but again, you'd have to feed a lot to, and I do have on my website and in books, and you can find it anywhere on the internet, lists of foods that are high, medium, and low in oxalates. So if you have an animal that's prone to making oxalate crystals or oxalate stones, there are some things that you want to avoid. The high end, you're going to be fine to have the low end in there.
Also, just, are you familiar with using moringa at all?
Oh, I love moringa. The cocoa therapy ladies introduced me to moringa and sent me a jar of it. And so I started using it when our little guy got cancer. I'm like, well, this can't hurt. Boom. But it's a dark leafy green that is very medicinally appropriate and would be great for these guys. So I love moringa. But I had never heard of it until I was doing an interview with them. They're like, we'll send you some.
No, I had a client who started using it on a dog with chronically high liver enzymes.
Yeah. It's amazing stuff. So moringa is good. It's a plant that's in the Philippines, and apparently everybody there uses it for medicinal purposes because everybody has one in their yard. Pretty awesome. So these guys, they need a job. They need to walk. They need to exercise. Otherwise, they get that stagnation, and then they're really unhappy and angry. This wood personalities, you do not want to have them be confined or frustrated. These are not the dogs to leave home in a crate all day. And you know these when you walk in the clinic room, they're kind of eyeing you up. Like, you make one wrong move, you're toast. And these are not the ones that you decide you're going to pin down to get their blood. These are the ones that you very carefully walk to the back leg and say, somebody else just distract them up front. Because you try to pin them down, you're going to lose. Okay, so wood is restrained by metal. Remember, the axe cuts down the tree. So if we have some of that liver chi stagnation, we just gave you some foods that are going to help drain. But when we get to metal, you'll see what foods support the metal element. So you could feed the metal to help restrain that tree. And if the wood is like chronically overactive, so I'm a wood personality, my wood has been out of control for at least 60 years. I think the first 4 I was probably okay, but you know. And so what I'm finding now is I have deficient metal. Like, my hair is getting thin, my hair went gray. Metal is lung and large intestine. Guess who has a weak respiratory system? Because my metal's been trying to chop down my tree for 60 years, and I've been resistant and I haven't been feeding my metal. And so now the first respiratory thing that comes along, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna die. So when you understand this stuff, it's like, and I finally figured that out, like, I don't know, a year ago. I was like, damn, no wonder I keep getting every cold that, you know, my granddaughter brings home from preschool. So I'm like, I need to feed my metal element. I'll be all better. Because I made it weak. And so water is the parent of wood. So if we have a weak wood, we also could feed the water element, because that's going to help feed the wood. Okay. This is where it gets really complicated, and so sometimes you just have to sit there and stare at those arrows and figure out, you know, which is going in which direction. But you don't need to do any of this. You could use everything that we talked about earlier today, and you're going to get to the same place. This is just taking it to another level. All right, so fire elements. This is our Irish setter. Summer is their time. Usually they're red-coated. And the elements that we have that come into play here are heart, small intestine, pericardium, and triple heater. I never worry about the last 2. I just look at the heart and the small intestine. These are the life of the party. If you have friends who are fire element, they're the one wearing the lampshade and dancing on the bar at the party. They are very vocal, social. They love going to parties. I do not like going to parties. I'd rather hide in the corner. Thank you very much. I'm actually an introvert. I know that's hard to believe, but these are very vocal, but they're a happy vocal. Like, their speaking is joyous. We have a little red English toy spaniel who's our fire dog. And when we're making meals, we've trained everybody to sit quietly in their spot, and she's like, and she sounds like a squeaky balloon, and she just can't control herself. And it'll get higher and higher and higher, and pitch till fall, and she goes, woo, 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 woo. And then I give her the mom look and the finger, and she's like, and then the squeaky balloon starts again. She just can't help herself. So fire dogs are just like, I can't help myself. They love the heat. They love to go lay out in the sun. Like, she'll go lay out in the patio on a hot day. And they are more yang. They usually have a lot of energy if they're, you know, well balanced. The fire element is closely connected with the mind. So the heart rules the mind. So when we have a lot of separation anxieties and manic behavior, we might look here, like, is the heart deficient and not nourishing the mind? This opens to the tongue, so they're talking, so that's why we use tongue in their recipes quite commonly to support them. And they have the shortest lifespan, because they're just always a party. So, although our dog that lived to 19 was a fire dog. He was a red Cavalier, and he talked a lot too. Like to herd his little girlfriends. So common problems that we see with fire: imbalance, heart qi deficiency, heart yin deficiency, and heart blood deficiency. We can see heart yang deficiency. We talked about those earlier, where they get a lot of damp and they're too cold. So anything associated with heart disease, heart failure, rapid heart rate, but that Shen disturbance, insomnia, a lot of our CCD, the cognitive decline, cognitive dysfunction, a lot of them have a Shen disturbance because their heart blood is weak. I was like, oh, well now I know what I can feed them to make that feel better. And there's herbs that we can, I have a great blog on CCD that talks about the different herbs and foods for that. So they may be hyperactive like our untrainable Irish setter, inability to focus. And because this opens to the tongue, ulcers, stomatitis, gingivitis, those are associated with an excess heat coming up, like stomach heat coming up past the heart. That's where we get a lot of these itises in the mouth. And they can be easily frightened and have separation anxiety if they are lacking. So foods that nourish the heart, well, think red. So certainly like treats like, so heart is going to be a big thing in there. But so tomatoes, again, I don't use this very much, but beets and red peppers. We actually have a recipe that has pork and beets in it. Red meats, organ meats are going to be really nourishing. And then we do need those heart chi tonics. You can't build blood and then not move blood because then you have stagnation. So we want to use things. So a lot of heart failure dogs, we're putting them on turmeric. I've got thyme in some of my recipes. Rabbit and beef are good chi tonics. Those orange things, the pumpkin, the squash, the sweet potato, shiitake mushrooms. And then the yin tonics, pork, fish. Again, I don't use grains, but brown rice would be a good one here if you want to. And then some of our veggies. And then draining damp when we get into heart failure. We looked at that a little bit earlier today. So celery, alfalfa, mushrooms, radish, turnip, asparagus, all that stuff is going to be really good. At the bottom it says anchovy, mackerel, and sardine. A little hard to see that. So this is just looking at it from a vitamin and mineral standpoint and where those things come from. So again, dark leafy greens, fish, eggs, poultry, mushrooms. Well, you know, that's the stuff that's being incorporated into our diets, and we're just rotating through these different things. B6, I don't use a lot of bananas, but they make a really good treat. B12, and that's where my sardines come in really handy. Vitamin A, like I said, we don't really have a problem getting our vitamin A levels up, particularly if you use liver, because vitamin A is really high in liver. Vitamin K, dark leafy greens, broccoli, eggs. As long as we're using those greens or eggs, that's never been a problem. It's going to be in the liver too. But folic acid, we get a lot of folic acid deficiencies. So again, liver, our dark leafy greens. Black beans, which I said I don't really use. Vitamin E, sometimes I'll have to add wheat germ oil in for that. Or you can use right now the vitamin E supplement that I'm using is a organic sunflower oil. So that's going to be another place where you could get it. Taurine, that's the bane of our existence with the whole DCM. It is in such high quantities in meats and organs that if you're feeding whole foods, you're never going to get a taurine deficiency. I mean, it's just really hard. Cats, I mean, their levels are really high, but they're also obligate carnivores. Why are they obligate carnivores? They need a lot of taurine and carnitine. That's where it's found. So liver, beef, pork, and heart for our carnitine. Coenzyme Q10, natural sources. Notice heart keeps showing up because like feeds like. But with coenzyme Q10 for my heart failure or heart disease patients, as soon as they get diagnosed with anything heart related, they're going on a lot of CoQ10. Magnesium, which we can get in our kelp and spinach. Selenium, again, easy to get in grains, and then our omegas. So just add your omegas at the end if you're going to cook. If you're just grinding and feeding raw and storing it, you can add them whenever. So wood is the parent of fire. Wood is going to nourish a weak fire. So we could feed, so if we have like a heart blood deficiency, well, dark leafy greens, feed the liver. It's going to feed the heart. Works really well. Water is the one that's going to put out the fire. And what happens when we have dogs, so I talked a lot about deficiencies for fire. If we have an excess fire, those, hyperactive, untrainable, like we're throwing paper on their fire with their kibble, what'll happen is they're going to go into kidney failure because they're going to burn out their water. So, looking back on this, when I was first in practice and we had all these animals going into kidney failure, eating their hot, dry kibble, and I'm like, oh my God, if I'd only known. Like I have to apologize to a lot of animals that I didn't know anything. And if we have a really high water or high fire dog that's excess, again, they're going to burn out their kidneys and they're going to be in kidney failure. So that's why it's really important to make sure that that fire is in balance. One, we don't want heart disease, and two, we don't want them to go into kidney failure. Okay, earth element, big yellow Labradors. Late summer, so this it's kind of like what we just finished, so September, early October, late August, is kind of the dog days of summer. It's that 5th season in Chinese medicine. These dogs tend to be yellow coated, but not necessarily. They're nurturing and motherly, and Labradors, I think, are like the best example because we have yellow ones, we have black ones, and we have the brown ones, or kind of reddish. The brown ones tend to be woods. Like if you look at a chocolate lab, if you're going to get bitten by a lab, usually it's going to be a chocolate lab. If you're going to have somebody who's a big fat mush, it's usually going to be a yellow lab. And then the black labs tend to be more metalish, so they're just like, just tell me the rules and I'm going to follow them. So I think they're like the best example because we've got across the coat colors, and they really do tend to fall into those. Like, you know, I don't think I've ever been bitten by a yellow or black lab, but I have been bitten by chocolate labs because they're more wood and they're like, yeah. Anyway, so these guys are mellow, really friendly. They just want everybody to get along. They wag their tails. They benefit from massage and muscle strengthening because the stomach and spleen rule this element, and they're responsible for muscles. So when we have weak spleen, we get muscle atrophy. When we have strong spleen, we can have athletic dogs with big muscles. This opens to the mouth and the lips, and we talked about it earlier, but the digestive system does not like cold and damp. So if you think about it, in Asia and Europe, they don't put ice in their drinks. The beer is not served cold. That's an American thing, and it is really bad for our digestive system. Like, you should drink everything at room temperature. I hate cold water. I drink room temperature water. See, this has been sitting here long enough to be room temperature. So we got to be really careful with these guys that we don't bring too much dampness to them, so we're always going to be looking at that. So imbalances with these guys, they're the worriers. They're like, is mom coming home? Is mom coming home? Is mom okay? You know, like, they worry about the other animals in the house. They are definitely prone to obesity. Earth element, they tend to be very round. They're going to be shorter in stature and round. They are prone to all those GI problems: anorexia, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation. They have a lot of gum and lip problems because that's where it opens up. They're very prone to dampness, so ascites, pleural effusion, pulmonary edema, that sort of thing. Hemorrhage, because the spleen function is responsible for holding blood in the blood vessels. So if your spleen chi is weak, you get that, you know, like my dog I was talking about earlier that had the petechiation and the low platelets. Yeah, he had an autoimmune problem, but when we strengthened his digestive system by feeding him real food, it went away. How about that? So prolapses, we kind of talked about those too. So things that are warming and drying to nurture our earth element. These are great herbs. Like I said, I use a lot of turmeric. I use a lot of ginger. And I like using, I don't generally use dried ginger. I like using fresh ginger. It smells so good and the animals really love it. So I use that very commonly and might just kind of as an ingredient in a lot of diets just to help the digestive system. Even animals that are tending more toward hot, I'll throw that in there. Because if I'm trying to cool them down, I want to be careful that I don't make their digestive system cold, and the ginger will really focus in there. So dairy is the enemy of these guys. So for those of you who want to do a lot of goat milk, and I love raw fermented goat milk, cow kefir that's fermented, that's all great. But if you have an earth element, you could just be a little careful with them because it is more damp and gendering. Foods that support the element, so like feeds like, so the stomachs of the animals, the tripe, the gizzards are great for these guys. And then things that are more warming, so lamb, chicken, venison would be good for these guys. And then our warming foods like the pumpkin, sweet potato, butternut squash would all fit in there. If in doubt, always support the spleen, particularly for our seniors, because most of them have weak spleen chi, weak digestive. Focus there first, get them digesting well so that they're transforming and transporting that food to make what they need to survive. So we always focus there on those guys. So wood restrains the earth. So if we have an overactive earth, so if we have excesses within the earth element, then we could feed wood to help hold it back. And then fire is the parent of earth. So if we have a deficiency like the muscle deficiency, yeah, we can feed earth, but what is fire? Fire is hot. And that's what the spleen and the digestive system wants. So if you have somebody with those deficiencies like the muscle atrophy, we could feed the foods that feed earth, but we could also feed the foods that feed fire, because that's the parent that's going to help nourish it. Okay, I threw in these two recipes because we get hot diarrhea and we get cold diarrhea. And what's been the staple in veterinary medicine? Hamburger and rice, chicken and rice. It's like the worst thing we could feed in the world. So for cold diarrhea, this is the spleen Qi deficiency, the weak geriatric animal that has undigested food in the stool, like they're just not digesting stuff. So a lot of times when we feed that chicken and rice, where's the rice? It's in the poop. It didn't get digested. It just came out. And this is a kind of a gray or tan watery stool that doesn't have a lot of odor. So I use chicken or venison because I want something that's warming. And then I use my ginger. You could use fresh ginger. I use dried there. And then I use butternut squash or pumpkin because they're warming, and I throw some mushroom in. You could use whatever mushroom you want to. Portobellos are just easy to get. Mix all that together, feed it for a couple days, and the diarrhea will usually get itself under control because we're warming and drying that spleen Qi deficiency and dampness that we're getting. So that can be really beneficial for those guys, and then you can kind of work into what they need to be eating after that. And then our hot diarrheas, these are the bloody mucoid, think of parvo. They smell to high heavens. So the last thing we want to do is give them chicken and rice. That's two hot things in a hot diarrhea. So we're going to use something more cooling. So turkey, pork, rabbit, take your pick, whatever they can tolerate. And this is where I'll use my peppermint or spearmint instead of the ginger because it's going to be more cooling, but it really supports digestive function. And then for these, I'll use, generally I like to use like applesauce or mashed apples. You could use sweet potato and then our mushrooms again. And this will usually get them back in control very quickly. My favorite herb for hot diarrhea, which in human studies has been shown to be more effective without the side effects than metronidazole, is coptis. Coptis herb is amazing for these hot, stinky, icky diarrheas. We actually just sell coptis on our website, and people just kind of keep it as the, wow, my dog's got bloody diarrhea. It's Saturday, nobody's open. I don't want to go to the ER. I'm going to give them coptis. I did have a couple of golden retrievers that had some IBD, kind of chronic problems. I had one who came from Texas as a pup. This woman like jumped through hoops to get this like amazing dog, and he comes, and within a few months, he's already got hot diarrhea. I was like, oh crap. So we, got a nice cooling diet for him, and then I put him on Coptis, and I put him at, like the normal dosage of 500 milligrams per 10 to 20 pounds of body weight twice a day. And it cured everything, got him under control. As soon as we stopped, he would go back. So he ended up, we finally figured out that his dose, instead of getting like 4 grams twice a day, 500 milligrams once a day, just kept him where we needed to be. And if that's what it takes to, if I can use an herb instead, otherwise that dog was going to end up on metronidazole. If he was anywhere else, he was going to end up on metronidazole for the rest of his life. Like, not doing that. All right, metal element, that's what we're going through right now, autumn. So these guys suffer with dryness because we've got, the air is starting to dry. Color associated with this is white, and this is the lungs and large intestine. So this is my poor lungs and large intestine are being destroyed by my wood element. This controls the skin, the hair coat, and the pores. So go gray. Opens through the nose because this is part of the respiratory system. These animals tend to be very aloof and independent and very structured. They're great for training to do things. Like a lot of border collies are this way. Sometimes the, like a white shepherd can be really good for these sorts of things. Like they like to have a job. So it's like, your dog's really frustrated and upset. Get him a job. Do you have children he can herd? Because you're not going to go get sheep. Give him something to herd. Give him something to do. It's really amazing. I've worked with a lot of communicators, and if you just say to your dog, look, your job is to make sure that nobody is stealing anything out of the refrigerator. Whatever you want his job to. I just had a client a couple weeks ago, and she was so tightly wound, and her dog was having large intestine problems. And I'm like, you're making your dog nuts. Sorry, but you're making your dog nuts. Like I can give you all the herbs and diet in the world, but if you don't straighten out your mind. And I'm like, could you please give your dog a job? And so she exercised all the time in her gym that she had made in her garage, and she would take the dog in there and they'd be in there for hours, and he would just sit in the corner like all depressed. I'm like, give him a job. Just tell him it's his responsibility to make sure you don't fall off the stair machine. I don't care. I don't care what the job is, give him a job. So these guys have to have structure. And so if you have a metal element dog and your schedule is all over the place, you're coming, you're going, you've got a bunch of kids, the household is wild, they are not happy. They are going to be a mess. They benefit from brushing and stimulation of the skin and hair coat because that's what it controls. So when they're unbalanced, well, it's lungs. So of course we're going to have all kinds of respiratory problems. Kind of funny. I used to have sinusitis all the time in vet school. I think my wood was a little out of whack. Nasal congestion, discharge, coughing, lung problems, but this is also large intestine, and it doesn't do well with dryness. So when we have too much dryness, we get constipation, those constipated cats that we talked about. So a little moisture for those guys. But a lot of skin infections. These are more the rashes, the dry itching, than that hot, moist dermatitis that we talked about earlier. Like, these guys don't have as much problems with summer damp heat. Their problems are going to show up more in the fall and winter when things are the air is getting dry. A lot of your zinc deficiencies are probably going to fall in here. So the lungs dislike dryness and heat because that damages the lung yin. So wind and dry air, so those forced air heating, it doesn't make these guys happy. So the color is white for this, so we look at white foods and also yin tonics so that we're moisturizing the lungs, moisturizing the large intestine. So this is where it gets really fun, because it's like, oh, the spleen hates dampness. Ooh, but the lungs really want some dampness. So, but if you know their personality, then you can balance into that a little bit better. So white meats, white mushrooms, omega-3s, honey is excellent. Manuka honey will stop most coughs, and it's also antibacterial. It's like amazing stuff. Just give them a fingerful, they'll stop coughing. They look great. These are guys that we really want to kind of avoid the dairy because of the phlegm problems, which clogs the lungs. If you are going to use dairy, please use goat or sheep. That's going to be a lot better for these guys than like a cow milk or a cow kefir or cow cheese would be for them. Pungent herbs that help clear stagnation in the respiratory tract include ginger, which I use a lot, and cayenne pepper, which I don't think about using for my pets, but most of them will take it readily if they need it. So they can be prone to skin damp heat in the summer and then that dry skin in the fall and winter. So foods that combat that are pork, duck, rabbit, and kangaroo. Kangaroo is nice and drying because it's lean, and the same with the rabbit. Cold water fish like our sardines, mackerel, cod, and clams can be really helpful for these guys. If they don't have grain allergies, these are going to be our cooling, sort of more moisturizing grains, barley, millet, and wheat. I don't think I've ever made anything with wheat. Have occasionally used barley or millet. And then we've got some fruits and veggies that are really good for these guys. Remember we talked about pears being good for draining phlegm, and these guys are prone to phlegm and snot in their respiratory tract, so that can be very helpful. Okay, so earth is going to be the mother of the metal. So if we have a weak metal element, we can feed earth or we can feed metal. And fire is going to control metal. But if the fire is too hot, it's going to dry out that metal too much. So if we have a metal excess, we can use the fire. But if they're too hot, then we're going to cause that drying. So that's what we have to be a little careful with. All right, so our water element, these are the scared ones that come in the clinic and they're hiding in the corner behind mom, under the bench. And they'd rather run away. They don't really want to bite you. They just want to leave. They do not want to be there. If you decide to forcefully get a hold of these guys, you might get bitten because you've left them no way to run away. And so, like, you have to really get these guys cornered to get them to bite you. They're submissively urinating. Like, they're just like, I'm just scared of life. One of my technicians was a water element. She cried a lot, because that's what they do. These guys are sad, and they're fearful. They prefer warmth. They're really intolerant to cold. This is ruled by the kidneys and bladder, which controls reproduction, bones, bone marrow, teeth, brain, spinal cord, nerve function. So the water element, the kidney element, is really responsible for a lot of things. It's responsible for the hind end, So besides supporting spleen chi, I'm looking here for, what else is going wrong, because it controls so many things. A lot of times these are black-coated dogs, but not always. But these benefit from chiropractic care because this element controls the bones. And this one opens to the ears. So if they're starting to go deaf, maybe their water element's getting a little weak. Maybe we better support that. So imbalances in this, you get a lot of arthritis, hind end weakness. Now your hind end weakness could be because they've got a lot of arthritis and degenerative disease back there. It could be that their nerve flow to the hind end isn't working as well anymore. But if we're getting muscle atrophy, then we're going to go look at that spleen chi, and we're going to fix that. Urinary problems for sure. So excesses that we can have, bladder stones, that's a damp heat. That's bladder damp heat. So those are where we get our excesses when we're getting inflammation. Growth problems for sure, because these are going to be our Jing deficiency kids. Dental problems, so those small breeds that we were talking about, that they're basically born with teeth that want to fall out on day one, or never come in right, or not fall out right. Premature aging and adrenal fatigue is something that I think we're seeing, certainly in people, but I think we see it a lot in our animals with chronic stress as well, that we're not addressing. Foods that support the water element, black or dark foods and salty foods are going to be really good. And I alluded to this earlier, the baby foods, which are, the beginning of life. So eggs, small nuts, small seeds, small fish, sprouts, those are the beginning of life. So they can be very helpful, like treats like, so feeding these guys some kidney. Duck is very good. It swims in the water. It's a, cold animal. Green tripe is good for these, sardines, mussels. So this is, and kelp or seaweed, anything that's a water product is going to be really good for these guys. They tend to be cold, so we tend to use more of the warming herbs, the ginger, the cinnamon, garlic, turmeric. And because this element is responsible for bones and joints, bone broth. Bone broth is amazing for any GI problems. It is so supportive, but it's also amazing for any bone problems, kidney problems. I have bone broth recipes on the website and in the books. So metal is the parent, it's going to nourish it, and earth is going to dam it up. So if we have excess water, like if we have that heat, then we could feed some earth element to control it. I don't see that too often. I find that the water element tends to be more deficient than anything else. So we have a personality assessment on the website. And if you go to our website and look up the pet personality assessment, it may be even bigger than this now. But you can use it for your clients. Feel free to copy it, edit it, make it whatever you want it to be. But it basically, they go down the column and they tick off, oh, he's friendly, he loves to be petted. Great, there's that column. Ooh, he's very cautious. Okay, that's in that column. And so they check them off and then they total them up. And if you're really lucky, at the end, it's like, oh, we've got 6 in that category, 2 there, 3 there, 1 there, none. And you go, well, 6, that's what he is. So that's their main, what happens is sometimes the animal is so out of balance that they're coming up in the wrong column because they're really out of whack. But most pet owners are able to figure this out, and then it helps you figure it out. We also have a human personality assessment if you want to figure out what you are if you don't know. It's a really fun party game. You hand them out to all your friends and you go, I knew it, you were a metal, that's why I don't like you, because you chopped down my tree. And actually I love my metal friends, but I just don't like them as clients. But if you understand why your client is acting the way they are, then it's a lot easier to go, oh, I get it, you can't help yourself. Like the client who talks over you all the time, they're probably a fire. Like they just can't shut up. And you're like, could you just stop for a minute? So anyway, so that's kind of fun. And then once you look at that, when you go to this on our site, it actually has a second part that talks about the imbalances. And it's like, oh, okay, well, he's a fire element, but oh, look at this, he doesn't sleep at night, and he pants a lot, or his tongue is really pale or really dark. And so you can go through that, and then it tells you, well, that's his personality, but he's excess or he's deficient, and then it tells you which element to feed based on whether he's excess or deficient in that particular element. So we've tried to kind of make this a little more user-friendly, that if you don't know that much about it, you can just kind of go through the algorithm and be like, yeah, okay. Now, you're going to get some where they're like 4, 4, 4, 3, 4, and you're like, shit, what's that? There's going to be, my husband is one of those. I have yet to figure out what the man is, because every time, like every 6 months, I'm like, here, could you do this? He's got the equal across the, I don't know. He's a mixed breed. So I haven't figured him out. I know what I am. So there's going to be some, and when they come in each time, like we're all born with a certain personality. Like my little redheaded talky dog, she's a fire. It doesn't mean she's always going to show fire symptoms, because if she gets really out of balance, something else is going to be showing me some other symptoms. But we're all born with something, and then it changes through our life. Like we start out kind of with the wood element when we're small children, and then we go through fire as teenagers, and we're like invincible, like nothing's ever going to happen to me. And then we get married and we have kids and settle down and become very earthy and nurturing. And then we move into metal. It's like, okay, my kids I'm an empty nester now. I got to get all my ducks in a row. It's time to be metal. Like I got it. Now I got to start balancing the bank account. Good luck. Wood, I'm a wood. I can't do that. Somebody else do it. So metal is like, I got to get all my ducks in a row. And then water, that's the end of our life, where we get very weepy and we're like, oh, it's the end. And we get very worried about everything and fearful of everything that happens. So you may see things showing up based on the stage of life as well. So that may skew it a little bit, but you do have an underlying personality. Like I'm a wood, but a lot more metal has shown up in the last few years, and now some water is starting to show up where I'm fearful of a lot of things that never used to scare me, and it's like, oh crap. So that's just moving through life. And we made it again. Wow, that was pretty good. I'm only a tad over.